produced a powerful film, which I think deserves the highest commendation, and also I hope it has wide distribution. But what I want to ask you about is, I've been looking into the possibilities of geothermal here in West Virginia, which I want to hear your comment. It's popular in California, but I think it is a potential here in West Virginia, and I wonder if you comment on that, which was not really covered in your film.
Yeah, good point. And I don't really feel qualified to comment because I really just don't know. I do know that they have had some problems in I think, is it in California or Washington, with seismic problems causing possible exaggeration of seismic faults in Germany as well. But it is indeed promising if it's done correctly. Rory, do you know anything more about geothermal?
For West Virginia, it's again, I'm not advocating against it, but just to address the issues with it. First of all, it could generate, if we did tap into the resource that they say exists here, we would be able to replace all the existing coal generation, which would have a huge benefit, obviously. The only concerns with the geothermal right now are, destabilizing the fault structures, and also you have to drill down between 2 and 3 miles to tap into that resource. And the best resources are in our most protected lands here in West Virginia, so there would obviously be issues related to that as well. So that's as far as I know. But it is a source of baseload power. I mean, you could easily replace coal if we tapped into it. If we did it correctly and made sure to address all the risks, which our legislature doesn't like to do very often, then then it would definitely create clean power for a very long time.
During the making of this and showing it around and talking with people, how often have you encountered, showing this in the reactions that people get? Have you found that there's been more people that have been surprised that just didn't realize the scale, the scope of what we're doing, and just never thought to care? Or have you even encountered people that don't care because that just kind of view it and just don't care? Because part of the problem that we face right now, obviously we got companies, some good, some bad, but ultimately it's kind of a problem that's been driven by us. It's been driven by people and our needs, to power, our iPods and iPhones and everything like that. I guess the follow-up question to that is, what's it going to take? Obviously, this documentary is a great step in that direction, but what's it going to take to get people to really start caring about this issue, being more conscious about, even as much as just the light switches in our own home and the light bulbs we use? What's it going to take to get people more conscious about the electricity that we're using, where it's coming from, and trying to spur people into trying to seek other sources?
Well, that's the $50,000 question. How do we get people more exercised about this? And yes, to answer your first question, I often get a response that people just didn't realize the full scope of our dependence on coal, that carbon capture and sequestration was a lot more complicated and full of risks than they had previously realized, if they'd even heard about it at all. But I think it comes back to our pocketbooks, and especially in an economy like we have today, it becomes even, as we can see from the recent actions in Congress, that the bottom line, our pocketbooks, our economy, the price of our electricity, the price of gas at the pump is what gets people, this is what is the primary concern. So the national concern about climate change has gone down in the last 5 years, even as our scientific knowledge has become much more solid. So it's an inverse proportion of the importance and our concern. The last time we got interested in buying hybrid vehicles was in 2008, when the gas prices went way up. And it looks like they're heading that way again because of the Arab crisis. So maybe in a cynical way, you can see there's a silver lining to the unrest there's a lot of silver linings in the unrest in the Arab world, but if it causes gas prices to rise again, maybe it'll spur us into some kind of action. But we have a new Congress in which I think most of the new congressional members took a vow not to believe in climate change. I mean, this is the know-nothings back to study ignorance in our legislative body. So in that context, how are we going to get any kind of legislation that directs the incentives in the proper direction? It's a tough question. The problem with climate change is you don't see it right in front of your eyes, although we're beginning to see that. Look at there are islands in the Pacific which are now sinking beneath the waves. A filmmaker friend of mine just won the Academy Award for Best Short Documentary for a film called Sun Come Up about the Carteret Islanders, who are now having to go to surrounding islands and beg that they will be taken in because their home island is now underwater, basically. All the wells have flooded and the waters are rising. The Arctic, in the summer months we now have the Northwest Passage that for how many centuries were we searching for? And there's a race to mine that and to build offshore rigs off the coast of Alaska when our petroleum reserves will barely provide 2% of the fuel, and whereas we consume 25% of it. We don't. Human beings don't think long term. Just the way our economy isn't geared to its long term. We have a quarterly report structure for corporations. We have a government that's in the hands of industry thanks to decisions like the recent Supreme Court Citizens United decision, which gives the power of corporations who buy their influence in Congress. And those politicians who are so beholden on this election cycle, on these funds, all the incentives are wrong for us doing the right thing. And we have to shift that somehow.
E.O. Wilson says that basically human beings are hardwired just to think about the next meal, the next dollar. It's survival. We're still there. We really haven't evolved much beyond that. We're just concerned about what are we going to do today to live. And in corporations, they live by the quarter, and politicians, it's the next election. And what do you do to get people really to be serious about these issues? I've lived long enough to see some pretty strange things happening in the weather out there. And when I look at what happened recently in Australia and then in Brazil, just inundation, the water, and the massive storms in the Northeast. These weather extremes are very typical of what the climate scientists have predicted. And even the Pentagon is taking the notion of climate change very seriously. I think one of the problems, or one of the mistakes that we made was calling it global warming instead of global climate change, because when we have these very, very cold winters and crazy winters, people they say, oh, see, there's no climate, there's no global warming, we're having this really cold winter. Well, that's just weather, but we're having major extremes because of all the moisture that's in the atmosphere now. But the Pentagon, and if you can go online and do this word search, go Pentagon, climate change, national security, and see what comes up. While they will not say that there is climate change and it's man-made, and they won't put anything to it in terms of how it's happening, but they are preparing for the worst. And why aren't we? I mean, if the military complex, they're starting to go green. You can go there and read papers about where they're trying to become more green, because they also realize that even our soldiers are dying because we're protecting this oil that, here we are, running our blackberries and everything else from. I thought one other thing that was really important in this film was the difference between, why we need energy and why China is pushing to have energy. And here, a lot of it has to do with our luxuries, our cushy lifestyles. And I'm guilty. I promise, I'm guilty. I grew up without air conditioning and all those fancy things, but you get used to it over time, right? And people in China are just trying to come out of a very, deeply rural poverty there. That's why they're trying to industrialize. And I think that's different. One other thing I wanted to ask Rory about is just the whole notion of West Virginia's metallurgical coal. What's happening with that?
for a number of reasons. Yeah, right now I guess it's not a direct relevance for the conversation. Well, it sort of is. So, so right now, a lot of, obviously, we're starting to see another spike in global metallurgical coal prices, and that directly affects Central Appalachian producers. They're making windfall profits again, mainly because of all the floods in Australia, which normally provides a number of countries with their metallurgical coal or manufacturing grade coal. And so now Central Appalachian producers are ramping up production and getting a higher price, and it's pushing up the price for all coal, which is pretty much the issue. Before I address that, also what's happening right now is foreign countries and companies are coming in and buying up a lot of these reserves to fuel their own industrialization and expensive manufacturing. So those two things are tied together, because what that is doing, when Massey takes coal that we could have used here in the United States for manufacturing purposes and sells it overseas to a higher bidder because they can, that not only artificially drives up the price that we pay for coal for electricity generation, it also drives prices up for metallurgical coal to where U.S. manufacturers can't compete. And if we continue doing that, and as the global demand for manufacturing coal, metallurgical coal expands, those prices are going to continue going up. Coal companies are going to be able to continue getting these windfall profits, but our manufacturers aren't going to be able to produce, windmills or the infrastructure for solar panels here in the United States. We're not going to be able to compete with the prices that global manufacturers can, because we have at least some respect for human rights and environmental impacts. So we're losing the clean energy battle because of that.
Well, I think we both had the same thought. From a sustainability standpoint, it makes sense to try to develop the resources that we have locally and use them locally. And one of the things that was not mentioned at all in the film is hydropower. We have a lot of rivers, we have a lot of powerful rivers in this state, and I wonder if any of you know what the current state of retrofitting dams to include hydro is in this state.
I know there's one I know there's one currently in the works, because we keep getting these large studies about it. I'm embarrassed to tell you that I don't know which one it is, but I know that is happening. It's one that I think had been fitted for that, but they've never really brought it online. And I'm sorry that I don't know, but I could probably find that out.
Is it Bluestone?
I think it is Bluestone. Yeah. So that's the only one that I'm aware of.
I know there's a lot of potential for it too, because there's a lot of locks and dams all around the state in the big rivers you're talking about that they don't really operate in terms of locks and dams anymore. One that I think was a locks and dams in Morgantown and the Wand River. I'm not sure that's what it was used to be used for or anything, but right now it's just a trash filter. Not that they ever clean up the trash, but behind the dam is just a buildup of trash.
Well, it is the single biggest source of green energy in this country right now, hydro.
Right. Pennsylvania's doing a lot too.
Yeah, and I was encouraged about the segment on the alloy metal plant. That's a really good project, and one of the things that we want to keep in mind in West Virginia is that we have a higher proportion of industrial customers here compared to commercial industrial. Most states it breaks down roughly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 residential, commercial, industrial. Here I think it's more like 40% industrial. And so those projects, those efforts to help industry get greener really pay off in terms of the overall reduction in demand for power. So that's a really good segment to have in this movie.
Thank you. Thanks. Anyone else? Well, thank you all for coming. It's been really interesting. Great. Oh, there is one. Yes, sorry.
What's the distribution plan for the movie? Well, where are we in the distribution plan? How do I tell someone to watch it?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. The film opened at the Full Frame Festival last spring and has been on the festival circuit, but it hasn't proved to be a very hot festival type film. It's not an edgy personal documentary like my friend Josh Fox's Gasland, for example. So, but we are optimistic that it will have a really strong and long life particularly in the educational and the university circuit. And we are partnering with Working Films and with Bullfrog Films to have distribution. And already this spring is really going to be our big rollout around the country. We are doing a big screening in Washington, D.C. next week, and Joe Rome will be there. We'll be doing that in other cities over this course of the spring, and it's going throughout the campus circuit. So it's going to have that kind of life. You can go to the dirtybusinessthefilm.com website, and there's a whole setting there on screenings, so you can tell your friends in other cities to get online and ask for a screening. And we're working with Sierra Club and RAND and other groups to work with their interfaith groups. Interestingly, there's a big market there of the green interfaith movement. Interfaith Power Light sent out 600 DVDs recently, and so it's going to have a long life. It just won't be big on the big screen in your theater. That's kind of a tough business now in documentaries. There's a lot of great documentaries this year. None of them made any money, unfortunately. So that era of going down and seeing, you may still be able to see a Michael Bohr film or Alex Gibney, a good friend of mine, a film of his, but the most of us documentarians are going to be now distributing over the internet. You can stream it live. You'll be able to do that with my film probably next year, but in the meantime, we're going to have educational distribution. But go to the website and pass the word.
It's pretty cool. Your DVD is actually really thin. You saved on resources, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
No, Aaron, thank you very much.